Welcome to APACC Live, episode 2. Let's go. There are professionals.
Professionals. I don't like that word.
There.
Yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Atlas. I use they, them, theirs. I'm the program coordinator at APACC.
My name is Carl. Harrelson. I use he, him, and his pronouns. I identify as mixed, Japanese and white, and also disabled. I was born a little deaf and also got some depression going on. Cis man, hetero, survivor.
Oh, Jessica, hi. All right.
Ready?
Ready? I didn't share my identity, so I'll do that. I'm transgender, non-binary, Southeast Asian, Chinese, Malaysian, Indonesian. I am healing from mental illness, and what else? Able-bodied, middle class. Yeah, here as a settler.
Yeah. Yes, we're gonna try to untangle our settlerism today.
Yeah.
For the recording's sake here, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is trying to reconcile the idea that because we're all indoors, because we're not like polluting basically at the clip that we usually do, the earth seems to be healing through this.
Right.
And that dynamic to me is interesting, sad. And then at the same time, the Navajo Nation has experienced more COVID-related deaths than 13 states. If they were a state, they are a nation. So I'm gonna stumble through untangling my colonized mind here. So I don't know, I have a hard time reconciling that fact that caretakers of the land are like dying disproportionately to the rest of us because of the success of genocide that we benefit from as we live on this land. So yeah, I don't know what to do with that. There's a lot of thoughts going through my mind there.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot about, we can't change that right now. We can't figure out what to do overnight, and change comes slowly, and we can't really help other communities except to be allies. And to be allies is to be someone who is understanding and who is in the path of learning, not only about other things but also about ourselves and like our roles and our responsibilities. Because yeah, in the end of the day, it's about what am I going to do. Sorry, I got distracted by people coming in. I like to click like the wave button. It's really cute. Yeah, so there's this desire of like, yes, I should be donating all my money and doing everything I can to help the Indigenous community. At the same time, I'm also responsible for my own healing as a person and as someone who occupy an identity within a different community that is not Indigenous. I was looking at the definition of the word Indigenous, and I can't believe I've never looked it up, and it's about people who continue to live in their homelands under settler colonial occupation. So that statement of like everyone is Indigenous to somewhere isn't really like right to say, because no, I didn't live in a land that is mine, that is colonized. And what does that mean as someone who is a settler here and functioning with colonialism and perpetuating that, while at the same time, like, yeah, having all these different roles.
Yeah.
This is great. I love this topic. I've never really thought about it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of the areas of privilege that I hold that I can't like get a grip on. Like I understand for the most part what it means to be a cis dude and hetero on this planet and a variety of other things, but the being a settler colonialist and benefiting from the genocide of natives is something that I'm overwhelmed by.
Yeah.
Which is just sort of how deeply ingrained that whiteness is, because that's like in order for us to justify being here, we have to believe that natives are gone, basically. And so I think that's something that's very deeply rooted and tough for me to tackle. And so when they like when Italy or Venice or whatever started talking about how dolphins are back in the canals or whatever, I was like, oh, that's really fucking cool. Like the nature's coming back. And I say that in like this happy, jovial sense,
Right.
without thinking about how deeply this pandemic is impacting Native and Indigenous communities right now. It hurts.
Yeah, well, it's like very satisfying, gratifying to see the earth healing a little bit from our slowing down of like this capitalistic, productive lifestyle. That makes me happy, but at the same time, knowing that this is also temporary, it feels temporary, because that question comes, what that's about. Well, once this pandemic is under control, or if it's defeated, like, are we are we just gonna go back to fucking up the earth some more, and even more so, because there might be war, because there might be like economic recession, and what is that gonna look like? So it's like, yes, joy, great, but also deep despair and fear, and knowing that the people who are protecting the lands are still getting fucked over, and how do we support them, and then at the same time like do our own work too, is a question that I want to have with all the people in the communities.
For sure. And I think specifically for the APIDA community, and particularly if you're East Asian, and maybe even more narrow to like Japanese, there's a lot of wrestling with colonization and some of the brutal genocidal actions that the Japanese folks did to Chinese folks and Korean peoples during wartime, and refusing to acknowledge it. And so like for me, I think the solidarity and the support and allyship that we have to display as an Asian American community with Native folks is like deeply urgent, and like there's a big gap there. I think like there's no reason for Native folks to trust us.
Yes, totally. I think you said something interesting. You're talking about like the relationship between Japan, China, and Korea. And just for the record, like, I have a Chinese identity and you have a Japanese identity, and both of us occupy a dominant identity in the APIDA community. So I think it's important to contextualize our conversation there, because we are not really like, our experiences aren't really speaking for anyone except ours. And at the same time, our experiences also occupy like a dominant narrative. And I haven't even thought about like, my people's relationship with your people, and then how that relates to everything else around here. Because China and Japan, we have a thing.
When I think about connecting it back to Earth again, like one of the biggest pollutants of the planet is the country of China. Like when I think about the Texas-sized island of plastic in the ocean, and then we freaked out about straws and not throwing them away. Like our plastic consumption, most of it doesn't actually make it to the ocean. It's like China literally dumping plastic into the ocean. And so I think I'm always going to loop back around in most of our conversations to what does community accountability look like, because of all of some of the dominant narratives that we've internalized as APIDA folks. We need to start digging those out to help everyone else out, because I'm always looking at the damage our community does versus the good work that our community is doing. That's kind of my natural tendency, my training as a man trying to engage in gender work. I look internally into the community and be like, what the fuck are we doing? Like,
And also, what the fuck am I doing? Like, because it's even if it's just our community, we're still looking at the external what others are doing. And it's a big question, and eventually we have to come down to our own healing. Like, how is my own healing include my relationship and awareness of my relationship to the land, and then consequently how do I relate to others who relate to this land?
Yeah.
I did some digging. On the history of Chinese people. All I found right now is the history of Chinese people and the natives and the indigenous people. I'm really curious how it relates to like Asian American or APIDA community in general, but this is what I found. And it's about articles and newspaper media written and created in the 1800s. So I'm thinking about like Chinese, the railroad, wait, no, what is it called?
Railroad, like the transcontinental railroad construction.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that. And I'm thinking about like opium, I'm thinking about alcohol. Um, and I found out that, so the natives and the Chinese function on like similar levels in the social, well, I wouldn't say that, in the way whiteness views them. And the narratives that were constructed is that both, let's see, how can I phrase this? There's a lot of antagonism and violence between Chinese communities and native communities back then. And this is around like California area in the West. And there's also a lot of friendship and like doing work together and marrying into each other's communities. But they're all in similar levels of like power, I guess, in the sense that it's like whiteness viewing natives as like savages, and then whiteness viewing Chinese as passive, effeminate, and then the natives viewing Chinese as passive, effeminate, and then the Chinese viewing the natives as like, oh, you look like us, you must be like Chinese people who were lost and became savages. And so you are also different from us, but in a sense that like we are also related. That was really interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there was a lot of like violence that are based on business, trading. You owe me money, I didn't give you money or whatever money, and then there's killing involved. There's violence based on like poker games and tricking each other. So usually it's about like, from what I read, it's like about materials or about like, yeah.
Interesting.
But there isn't any like, you have to become like me or you have to assimilate to my culture or like that kind of domination. I didn't read about. And there was also a lot of instances where Chinese men married the native women because there wasn't enough Chinese women, because the people who traveled, right, are a lot of men. And then there are conversations of like whiteness feeling threatened by the Chinese and the natives. All these like stereotyping happening in a way that like interacts with each other. So that was really interesting, the way like whiteness exercised metaphorical control on both like Chinese and native identities as they were meeting and interacting with each other like for the first time. And yeah, the white people were seeing Chinese are like, oh, they're gonna corrupt the native people because they're so sly and like cunning with their business tricks, whatever. And then still seeing like the natives as like savages who are going to destroy the Chinese because they're warriors, blah, blah, blah. And it's just so interesting how like that was my history here to the people who protected the land. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
That's awesome. I was thinking when you said the way white supremacy controls the narrative of us in a lot of ways, I'm starting to realize how important it is to construct people of color and Black and Indigenous folks as easily addicted to substance, succumb to addiction, because there's a lot of narratives around opium use for Chinese immigrants in particular.
Yeah, because we gave the opium, and we're also the middlemen to alcohol distribution, and we earned. And by we, I mean I'm talking about Chinese people. earned like money from distributing those alcohols to the Native community.
Okay. Right. And so, yeah, this pattern of addiction, and each race basically has their thing, if you will, attributed to us. Even if the government flooded the neighborhoods with either crack or cocaine or alcohol to the natives and opium to the Chinese. But that's pisses me off how successful colonization and whiteness is really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like that started the whole model minority thing. The whole like, yeah, the Asians, they'll listen to you and they'll be like you, and they'll behave and like do all these civilized things. And we're all just, yeah, I'm still like working on undoing all those patterns in myself.
Yeah, I think part of the baseline education our community needs, that we were kind of sort of framing some of this APACC Live stuff around, is some of the model minority stuff.
Yeah.
If APIDA folks and other communities of color don't understand how model minority functions, we're doing a disservice. Like, APIDA folks obviously should have a good grasp on being able to just jump into a conversation and bring up dynamics of model minority myth. Like, that should be a skill that we have. And so I do think it's important to do some conversation / education around it. I think it's a duty of ours.
Yeah. We can talk about like, how are you undoing your model minority myth right now as a conversation about the land?
I'm not. I don't know if I can totally see the.
I want other people to do it.
Yes. I want to tell you how to do it and not actually do the difficult work. That's like the model of higher education and student affairs. It's like, I'm going to teach you how to do the work.
Yeah. Thanks, Jessica.
Model minority as it relates to, because when I think about how model minority is impacting us right now, and then maybe I can loop back around to my own work. But I think the fact that we don't know how many that are, I tried to find how many reports there have been of anti-Asian racist violence in the United States, because I keep thinking and hearing like there's more reported and recorded cases of anti-Asian racist violence than there are cases of COVID in the United States. And I think there's, what are we at, like 120? We're really high in terms of like the number of cases.
COVID?
Yeah.
Yesterday marks the 40,000th death in the US caused by COVID. That is, I think the statistics I read is like having a 9/11 incident every 3 weeks for like some months. Like, that's the level of like shit we're going through right now. Yeah.
And so the invisibility of the violence against us, I think, contributes to some of the model minority myth thing, because, well, oh man, there's so many layers. So part of being a model minority is trusting the government will do something, right? And so we might be more likely to report stuff to the government, which means we
right. Like, depending on institutional resources.
Yeah. And so there might be, which is unbelievable. But the point is, like, there might be more resources there. There might, like, CSU is more likely to say, like, don't be racist towards Asians than they are to say, like, don't do blackface. And we have proof of that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And at the same time, like, if it's really hard to find those statistics, I think that's another example of like, this stuff doesn't happen to the model minority. They're not, like, it's hard to find those statistics.
And also I think about how we have internalized that myth of passivity, of like, I mean, I grew up in China and I've seen what it's like there. We don't talk about the government, because if you do, you will get like arrested in the middle of the night and disappear. So that passivity comes from somewhere, at least for me. And yeah.
And then like part of the contribution to the model minority myth is like there's actual like value in Japanese culture for like government and militarism in particular, and so like speaking out against the country or speaking out in general is looked down upon. There's a group called the No Boys back in the internment time. That's a really interesting read, who were ultimately segregated and shunned from the community for like resisting government institutionalized internment camps. And they were shunned from the community. So some of the internal stuff is there. And then when other communities believe in the model minority myth, it's easier to pick on East Asians, right? They don't think we're going to fight back.
Right.
And so maybe that is an excuse for increased violence in terms of believing in the model minority myth. So when I think about my model minority status and how it's used to distance me from issues relating to Black and brown folks, if I don't also then like speak out against state violence against Black people, state violence against Indigenous people, then I am not contributing to the model minority myth. And so the way that I try to fight is to speak up, is to tell my story, is to say like, and encourage other APIDA folks, hey, like speak up, stand up, like we got to get out there and do this thing. And so
on what, right? Speak up on what?
All the time. Against all injustice, because we can't expect other.
I'm loving all the comments that is happening right now. It's I just need a minute to process that. I think there are also responses to what you're saying, Carl. Carl's spitting some mad facts, Jessica said.
Thanks.
Yes, what Johanna said about access, like we have to talk about not just our experiences as like people who suffer under the model minority myth, but also the privileges that we get and the power we get from being white adjacent.
It's a really interesting balance because like maybe we're more likely to be doctors or whatever, right? Or maybe we're more acceptable as doctors and lawyers, right? People might trust us more opposed to seeing a Black lawyer or a Black doctor. And at the same time, there's still a bit of a bamboo ceiling of like pay, and like you won't see a whole lot of people get through to the higher paying administrative positions.
Right. There's still a ceiling. Like, yes, you can play with us, but only for so much.
And we're speaking specifically about East Asian folks. Like model minority, I don't think is necessarily granted to Southeast Asian or Pacific Islander individuals. A little bit to Desi South Indian or Indian folks at least. It's a little bit, particularly in the engineering and tech fields. So
I like what Jessica pointed out about collectivism as also a part that contributes to this idea of passivity and fitting in and not speaking up.
Yeah,
that's a big one to unpack.
I struggle with the idea of collectivism and collectivist ideas actually being a thing, because there's so many greedy ass Japanese and Chinese folks out there that are like looking out for their own and making all this fucking money and not necessarily giving it up. So I don't know, like sure, maybe the value is there, just like freedom is a value of the United States.
I mean, just like anything is a value, communism is a value, capitalism is a value. I mean, it's pointing to something though. It's pointing about the way like we operate as a conscious being. I think growing up in a collectivistic environment means that like my consciousness doesn't just ends in my body, it ends in my community. So then whatever I do, I'm held accountable to my community. And that may have to do with my community as the government as part of my community, and I wouldn't say anything bad to that. And it is hard trying to be collectivistic in an individualistic world, because your collectivism becomes individualistic in some ways, because then it becomes, it's like us versus like other people still.
Yeah. Again, so
Hence the tight networks of like corruption and all the things between Asian communities.
yeah. So
Mhm.
I'm still struggling to connect my internalized model minorityism to Earth and Native folks, but it's being tagged with the model minority myth does. Oh, Jessica just talked about it. It does help us assimilate in this sense, like the disconnection a lot of U.S. born Asian Americans feel to their home culture as a process of survival, um, or believing that we can assimilate, um, is another example of our proximity to whiteness, or the internalized belief of our proximity to whiteness, that we can just, yeah. And then it bursts Andrew Yang, right? Like we talked about last week, in terms of now's the time to be more American than ever. Is a great example of model minority perpetuation.
I saw a sticker or a picture today on Instagram of like, as American, there's a banner that says as American as apple pie, and then behind it is 2 roast ducks hanging. And that made me think about like, yeah, that's American. I think about how like in the process of assimilation, we also abandoned our relationship with the land, because as someone who grew up upper middle class in Southeast Asia, there's this relationship with nature that is very disconnected, that is very much sanitary and um, yeah, I think about Singapore. Like I spent summers there, and Singapore is like New York, but if New York is like very germophobic and very uptight about everything. So everything is, yeah, sanitized. Everything is efficient, fast, and sharp. And how like that is assimilation. That is assimilation as a country to like Western ideals, to capitalism. Um, and how for me growing up, like, yeah, we went to the beach, yeah, we went hiking, but we never got dirty. We always have like some kind of protection gear going on, and when you get home you shower and you change your house clothes. And how I was so disconnected from the land and me and the people that I'm around, and how, what does that mean then, for me to try to understand, like, yes, I have this model minority tendency that also manifests in a disconnection with the land, and what does it mean to reclaim my relationship with it. And I think about how, like, at least with my culture, with Chinese Indonesian culture, like food is very much connected to the land. Like we eat what's around us, we don't waste anything, and it's also connected to medicine and the elements, right, of like the fire, wind, air, and earth.
You got
Earth.
it.
And how like my relationship to the land manifests in my culture and in the way I eat, the way I think, because I was taught to think like, oh, if you are very aggressive and you feel like you have a sore throat, that means you have too much fire in you, and you should eat some cucumber or something watery and cooling. So because I don't have a physical land to connect with, or I didn't had that access, but I had that in my culture, and that is something interesting that I'm still trying to make sense of.
Yeah, I think so I sort of inherited the privileges of not having to work with land, not having to grow my own food and consume it. And so when I think about disconnection from land and how far back it goes and how stratified it is in Japanese society, at least, of like, don't, like, the rich don't work in the fields, like it was looked down upon.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to, like, the people who did some of the necessary things for society, who were outside all the time and were browner and darker, were looked down upon.
Capitalism.
Yep. And they definitely had the most connection to the earth too, right? And so I don't know, maybe I need to start growing food and consuming
If it
my own
makes you
food.
happy, right?
Yeah,
Like it
I
has
don't
to
know.
be something that feels good. I love slaughtering. Like I miss the wet markets.
Mm.
Like where meat is just like laid on the table for like 3 hours. It's not refrigerated. And yet here
Right.
we are. Here I am, I'm fine. Um and just like the blend of like in wet markets, it's like a blend of like vegetables, animal, like not animal, meat meats hanging around and humans and how they're all like mixed into one. um I really miss like slaughtering my animal and chopping it and butchering it and feeling that relationship with the thing that I eat, because nowadays everything here in the US is like packaged and doesn't even look like an animal anymore. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. I think we're starting to navigate towards like figuring out
Yeah.
a conversation about how to relate COVID, land, and what does solidarity look like?
Yeah. I was
Indigenous
reading
folks.
this article by someone. I'm gonna pull up his name so I can pronounce it correctly. Bayo Akamolafe, and he's a writer. And he wrote this like speculative fiction essay about the virus as someone with agency, as opposed to like this thing that we are trying to like erase. This blob with
The
whatever he
red
called
things.
suctions. It's really interesting. Like he points out in an article, it's really interesting how we use that image as the face of the virus, because that image is recreated. It's not exactly what the virus looks like. And also, how do we tell like what part is the virus? Knowing that, um, knowing that like we are very like human centered people, and the way we view nature is like human versus nature. We forget that, like I forget that I don't exist just as me, because I cannot exist without air, without trees, without vegetables. So in some ways, like lotus root is part of me because I ate that. Like bitter gourd, mushrooms, all these things are part of me and my sense of self. And so therefore, how can we see the virus as this one little thing that is like separated from everything it's connected to, considering that viruses are something that also evolved with us as beings, and viruses have been there here the whole time, and their job is to find cracks and crevices in our immune system, for example, and latch onto it and make us the host, and then make more viruses. So in some ways, we're also part of the virus now, like in a more literal sense. I'm going to assume that I have it, so I'm going to know that I'm not just human. I'm other than human, because I also have that virus in me. Um, so um, knowing that means that my relationship to the virus is no longer just something that I want to like run away from, but something that I can really learn a lot from, because we as a collective are looking at the not just this virus but the viruses of our system, the way that capitalism and whiteness has infiltrated our system and taken it as and turning it into something that doesn't benefit us as human beings.
I find it, yeah, I find that a really interesting a really interesting concept, and just kind of re-highlights how important our human relationship to the earth is so twisted by whiteness and colonization, because like it just chopped the forests down. And I think so there's some staggering extinction rate going on right now. It's like 50% of birds are gone, or like it's really fucking scary. And so like, if we took the attitude that these viruses evolve with us, then maybe we as humans should be evolving better, right?
Yeah.
And so like, I really, really hope and really, really wish that we take lessons from this and do things differently. Like I start seeing people, I should have actually read the article, but I saw a headline about some country investing heavily in like green energy initiatives, or like they totally got rid of their oil and coal industries or something like that. That's the kind of shit that we kind of need, right? Like immediate and fairly drastic change.
Right. Right. And yes, like the way we work and live and consume definitely have to change. And yes, there needs to be like better policies, etc. But I'm thinking about my life, like the next 10, 20 years, like what am I gonna do? So that I'm integrating like all the things that I need to learn about at this time, um, and setting a path for my life that like is aware of what is actually happening. Um, yeah, I just, this whole conversation really makes me want to just find a bunch of Asian people and start an Asian farm and have these conversations over food.
Yeah, after a good slaughter.
Yeah, after a good slaughter, we can have like barbecue and hot pot.
In the forest.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Have you had
I
a
don't,
sumo? It's like Japanese hot pot, apparently.
huh.
You just throw stuff in a pot and eat it and then go to sleep.
The best thing that I had my last trip to Japan was actually Korean barbecue, I think.
What?
So, yeah.
You didn't even have like
No,
teppanyaki or anything?
I had a ton of food.
Yeah.
Japanese, the Korean barbecue meat was so fucking good.
Well, you know, yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And if like, does that help? Is that part of the solution? Is we create our own communities or exclusive communities in the middle of nowhere, grow our own food, eat and sleep? I don't know. It
Yes
makes me
and
think.
no.
Yeah.
We have to change our own life, but we also have to like influence others by embodying what we have changed about ourselves. And what was I thinking? You said something. You said something that brought something up. I forgot. Never mind. It'll come back later.
Fine. It's fine. That made me think again about my dad and the attitude of like, if a bunch of us die right now, a bunch of old people in particular. Again? It brings up the conversation I have with my dad that I talked about last week around like he's basically like a bunch of us old people die, like whatever, it's probably good for this overpopulated earth anyway.
Yeah, but people are still producing.
Yeah. It's just like
more people.
Dude, I saw a story about someone having 12 kids. I'm like, are people still doing that? Like, what the fuck are you doing? Get out of here.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's a lot of people. Whew. Okay. Let me try to tie it all in together. So.
Good luck.
Oh my God, this is so big. It's a map. We talked about like, yeah, we want to talk about this more with the community. I want to see my community be more aware of our relationship to, the land, the people who are taking care of it, and the people who are harming it, and the way we lead our lives. And then this virus situation that's just putting us into a whole different space as a collective, and a space that is, yes, it's benefiting the earth. Yes, we are slowing down. Yes, we have space to address the systems that aren't working because we are in the like disaster capitalism model where the rich benefit. I'm just so pissed that Amazon, Jeff Bezos got fucking $24 billion while we get $1,200 Like, what is happening? So it's amplifying all these injustices. And it's, yeah, the downside is a lot of deaths, a lot of suffering, a lot of people being put at risks. And yeah,
And
we're reflecting
disproportionately for disenfranchised communities.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like I think about, yeah, we as Asian community, we are going through a lot of racist shit, but we don't have to deal with that all the time, and that's a privilege. And yes, it sucks, but also remember that it was good a lot of the times. Um, and how like this virus is this something that like infiltrates everything, and how can we also be like the virus, like how can we also infiltrate the cracks of the system and and take it and take what's ours and duplicate like things that make sense to us. And like I was talking to a friend last night and she was like, is it wrong that I just don't want to be around white people? Is it wrong that I just want to be with my Asian like community? I'm like, no, it's not, because that has been taken away from us. We never took away theirs. So we have a right to reclaim that. And I see that as like having conversations like this and talking about what like solidarity looks like across different Asian identities, because it's so big. And yeah, I wish there's like more voices in this live discussion too that isn't like East Asian or Southeast Asian. um
I really like the idea of being a virus to capitalism, being a virus to patriarchy, being a virus to whiteness. Like I think that's a really neat concept of infiltrating, like,
yeah.
because we know the system both emotionally and academically.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of infiltrating the barriers, the immune system of capitalism, patriarchy, and replicating things that we love, things that sustain us, things that help community grow,
Mm-hmm.
is a really cool model of doing social justice work.
Yeah, yeah, because while I'm all about like separatism, I'm also about not leaving people behind and
Mm-hmm.
not neglecting, because everyone suffers from colonialism and capitalism and whiteness, even white people, even white men. um, so yes, it's not my job to help them, but it's also my job to create um, an environment that is beneficial to people around me.
Yeah, because separatism stuff doesn't necessarily work for mixed folk, right? Like you're asking me to
Right, you're mixed.
separate. Yeah, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're asking me to separate from my family in different ways. Although,
Mm.
no, I don't. I would never. But I don't think I've ever told you this story, but I forget where we were at my parents' place, and my uncle Tom, funny enough, was there. Uncle,
Oh.
yeah, and my uncle Joe was there. Um, and we ended up. I started talking about Trayvon Martin. I'm pretty sure, because it was the time. It's probably like 12 years ago now, right? Like, holy shit, yeah. um, and my uncle Tom ended up calling me a racist for defending black folks, right? And
What?
I'm guessing he felt attacked in his whiteness or whatever. Um, and even with that happening, even understanding that he probably voted for Trump and he's like in there like that, I would still have a really, really difficult time being separatist from white communities because they are my community.
Yeah.
Like I love him as an uncle. Like they've been really good to me. So it's just, it can be that particular solution. As much as I emotionally understand wanting to never see a white person again, I get that.
Right. 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 Yeah.
I can't.
It's still part of you. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, because we're not talking about whiteness as like a race, although it is associated with a race. We're talking about whiteness as an oppressive system.
Yeah.
And and we're talking about like white people need healing too. Yes, we have to be very strict about the boundaries in which we reach out and help, but at the same time, like I have compassion. I have I have understanding that we share this universal experience of like suffering. I just want to point out this comment that is really interesting that just popped up. It says, how would you say what I said about being okay not to hang out around white people? How does that fit with what you said, Carl, about it being important to be as American as possible in this time?
Yes. I'll
First of all,
clarify.
I also need to clarify. I'm not American. I don't have a passport, but I will get my US passport in May. So I will be American. I guess culturally I am American. Anyway, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and then I don't think I said it's important for us to be as American as possible in this time. I was actually criticizing Andrew Yang for saying it.
Yeah, what was that? What was he saying? Anyway.
Yeah. So said about it fits. It doesn't fit. If I said that, it wouldn't fit, which is fair. But there's too much about what I hate about what it means to be American right now. Makes it really difficult. Because like the conversation around like the principles created by our founding fathers, like a bunch of 25 to 30-year-old white dudes had all the say in what the hell freedom was about. To say that we're trying to live up to those principles feels inherently wrong, I guess. Like I could argue that the most American thing that I'm doing right now is criticizing what America is, because that's the freedom that my founding fathers gave me.
Yeah. The liberty pursuit, whatever the fuck.
Yeah. It burns me up inside to think that's what we're trying to live up to.
Yeah, so. That might be. I don't understand what it means to belong to a cultural group. So I don't really understand yet what is American at this point, because what I knew about America or North America is very much based on like white Christian this had stuff.
Yeah.
But there needs to be something, I guess. I feel like this need to talk about like American or like what it means to be in the US. There needs to be something that like ties up all the common experiences that we're sharing that isn't patriotic.
I mean, but we have to define our own patriotism. If we're going to be American citizens, we have to figure out something different from what is set out for us, that what patriotism means, because I'm not going to wave a flag around, that's for fucking sure. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime to get to a point where patriotism makes sense to me.
Right.
I am patriotic to social justice and dismantling systems of oppression. Is that what patriotism is? I don't even, where does the word come from? I don't even know.
It just smells of capitalism.
It's gross. Yeah.
I cannot shake it off. I feel like we need better. Like I was reading, what's her name? Donna Haraway. She's like a white woman who writes a lot about the way we view ourselves as like people, and the way we view ourselves as like, again, going back to the topic of like separated from nature. Like when we talk about patriotism, we're still talking about people. We're not including the land. We're talking about like, our right to exist on this thing. As if like we're an external like invader. So it doesn't feel right either. And she was suggesting like different terms. I didn't write it down, but instead of humanity, she suggested humustes, or it's based on the word humus, which is about soil, like the part of the soil that's like black and alive, like when things decayed. And why are we using these terms like they're so human centric, and how can we start seeing ourselves as not just human, that they're like more than human, like calling plants and animals more than human beings that are also part of this fight and part of this pursuit, whatever we call it, for like, yeah, a better environment.
Yeah, and we really have to let go of the notion that we got here by ourselves. This very white notion that like I was the one that worked hard my ass off to get to where I am, and only me. Like I had no help whatsoever, because that means you're not thinking about the earth and how it fed you, and the earth and how it gave you sunshine and time to sleep.
And how we're part of it. Like, yeah, there's very little boundaries that separate us from the earth. Like we are the earth. We carry that in us. So what does it mean to exist with that reframing in mind and embodying that reframing? I feel like that's something that is to come for me, at least. Like I don't have clear conscious awareness around that. I think I do, but I cannot intellectualize it.
I mean, I think I understand at least some part of my relationship to the earth, because I know that the earth is the only being that accepts me fully for who I am. Because I think growing up mixed, growing up partially deaf, made it really, really difficult to find full acceptance in any community, even in my family. But like when it snowed here, when it dumped snow here on Wednesday last week, I think, I actually love that time, because for me, I always know that I miss sounds, that I miss noises, that I miss what people say because of my deafness. But when I stand outside and it's snowing like that, I know that it's silent. And that's when I fully feel myself. Fully feel accepted by the earth. And so I know for me that healing, I don't know how to give back for that quite yet, but I do have some connection to the earth in that sense.
Right. And it's kind of like, how do you give back to your mother, right? How do you return that which has so been abundantly given to you? You know, what you said made me think about this article I wrote about how, when I first engaged with like live crabs, fish, live frogs, chickens with my grandma, like we would, kill the animals and like cook it. There is no gender, there is no conversations around anything except the food, and how, wow, that just feels so good. I don't have to worry about all these dumb labels and identities and drama. Like Asian, like my culture's drama is so bad. This like lineage of family shit that's just carries over, and I don't have to worry about that, and how that place is like a refuge. And I think just by doing that alone is big.
So it sounds like we need to be more conscious and intentional about the food that we consume, more deeply appreciate it. We need to simultaneously hold our humanity while also dehumanizing. Post-humanizing. Terrible.
Composting.
Because our survival depends on not consuming the earth, and it's a very human thing to consume this earth and think we have nothing to do with it, or that we are entitled to consuming the earth. So
it says we have 1 minute 36 seconds.
Okay, let's close out.
Yeah.
Go for it. You got this. No.
What?
Nothing.
Okay. I appreciate this conversation. We talked about a lot of things today. I don't know what we'll talk about next week. I think we decided to talk about this on Friday, so thank you for having a really good conversation with me. Thank you everyone for watching and commenting. We'll have the recording up on our Facebook and Instagram.
And YouTube.
And YouTube, Carl's compiling clips that are worthy of compiling or whatever. We'll have that out too.
All right, y'all. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, Alice. I'll see you in 5 minutes in our next meeting.
Oh, right. We have our thing. All right. Cool. All right. Bye, everyone.